Hey everybody! All right, so I've actually been getting a lot of messages about this because I had gotten the Fallen Order Kestis Lightsaber, and I have been wanting to weather it up like I did the Disney lightsaber. So I'm actually going to use this Disney lightsaber and everything that I did as far as paint and their design and everything here as reference to the pommel half here of the lightsaber that I have. So there's a little piece that comes out here, just screws out. So what I'm hoping is that they've got these little rubber pieces here. I'm assuming these are supposed to be brass, and it looks like this little red wire popping out. And then they've got some pretty good detail, but we're going to use that as reference. All right, let's go to Home Depot. Alright, so I went to Home Depot and they really didn't have any luck over there, unfortunately. They just didn't have anything I was looking for. So I went over to Michael's and I just picked up a couple of things like metallic paint for those little brass bars. I wound up getting some just kind of decorative wire that was kind of like on a brass kind of color. It's going to get a little coat of paint anyway. And just for some extra wires to pop out, I just got some silver, really thin stuff here. But hey, we'll see what we can make happen, right? All right, so I'm back at the studio. We have all the usual suspects of paint and brushes, sandpapers, and things like that. So I guess the safest thing to do is to start with the bending, because if this goes wrong, the whole project's probably crap. Okay, so I used the stove to heat this up just so it would soften the aluminum a little bit. And once it got up to some decent heat, it bent really easily. And something happened which I thought would happen and I was hoping would happen, but it came out so much better than I thought it was gonna. Look at the color. Look at that burnt color it added to that. All right, let's start working on some paint work for this guy here. This is all gonna be pretty solid dry brushing. Now remember, with dry brushing, you want to do everything very lightly and build it up in layers so that you don't overdo it. So what you can see now is that with the dry brushing, we're just kind of getting the outlines of everything. We're not, giving it a solid coat, but we're just getting the highlights in there on the highest points. So this is very little paint. All right, next we're gonna grab a silver paint just to add some extra highlights on top of that. All right, so you can see that we have just a couple of layers of some of the metallic kind of gold color or bronze and a little bit of the silver just to kind of add a little highlight and just bring it out a little bit. And just a very tiny bit of black just in some of the little parts there. All right, so I think the paint is done on this. So I guess the next step we're gonna have to move to is some of the wires. So you can see here on the Disney version, we've got some of these bronze copper wires kind of coming out from a few spots here. And we're gonna emulate that a little bit. So I bought this and some thin silver wire. So we're gonna see, probably won't be exact, but we'll see what we can get. So over here, there are these tiny, tiny, tiny holes. Let me see if I can light it up from the other side a little bit. I'm actually gonna try to squeeze some of these little wires through there. That these little wires are like a hair too thick. So I'm trying to squeeze them down a little bit. The wire's pretty soft, so this was actually reasonably easy, but I had to do 8 of them. All right, next up, we want to try to secure them in a little bit, so I'm going to use some 5-minute epoxy, and I'm just really hoping that it's going to hold it in place. This is a 2-part epoxy, so you want to have equal amounts of each one and mix them together thoroughly. I then coat the bottom of all these little rods now, and we're going to stick those all in, and I'm just going to pray that they all stay in with the epoxy. This should do the job. All right, now that I have it all set in, I'm just gonna wipe off some of that extra epoxy that may have dripped out. All right, now that we have them all set in, we're just gonna kind of clip them at random sizes, somewhere around the length of the bottom of the pommel there. Make a couple of shorter, you know, because this thing broke and it's just gonna break randomly, so we just wanna kind of emulate that. All right, once you have them all cut down, just grab a little wrench or a little pliers or something and just kind of randomly bend them a little bit so they look a little broken. Now I want to put some of this really thin silver wire in there. So I'm thinking, since absolutely nothing happens with this little pommel piece, there's no lights, there's no electronics, I think I'm just going to try to thread this in a couple of spots. That way I could just kind of use one wire and it'll kind of hold itself in there. All right, I think that'll work. So let's just clip off the excess wire here, and I'm sure this will pretty much stay in place. I'm not even going to put any epoxy or anything on it. It feels pretty tight and really secure in there, so we're just going to leave it like that. All right, let's get this pommel half back in here so we can move on to painting the grip part. All right, let's grab some brown and some burnt sienna, and we'll do a little mixing here, some highlights there, and painting there, and you know, we'll tone down this sunburst effect that happened with heating up the grip piece. Even though it looks great, it's a little too in your face, too shiny, it's too metallic looking, so we'll tone that down a little bit and matte it up a little. Okay, so now we're going to add a little bit of silver around the edges of the broken area, just to kind of make those pop a little bit and kind of look like the metal's coming through from the bottom. I do not have a Dremel, but if you do, it's perfect for this. Right now I'm just going to kind of sketch these little scratch marks in here until I can get one, but if you have one, feel free to kind of cut right into this metal and scratch it up. And since we have the muddy brown paint out already, we're just going to put a light coating of that all over the pommel and wires here. This way it'll tie it all together. Alright, it looks like it's time to move on up to the midder section. We'll grab a Scotch scour brush, little scrub brush that they have here, and some sandpaper probably. Now, unlike some of the other lightsabers, this doesn't have that shiny mirror type chrome plate to it, so we don't have to really do a ton of work. I'm not really sure what this texture is or how they get this, but it's kind of like a brushed metal already. You know, your fingerprints don't really stand out on it or anything. But we just want to try to scratch it up a little bit more and just kind of knock it down a notch or two. So we're going to first start off with our black paint, a little bit watered down. That way we can kind of move the paint around a little bit and it cooperates. Now with every coat of paint, we're going to grab a paper towel and we're just going to kind of dab and remove some of the paint. And whatever's left over is going to dry a little bit, and then we'll put another layer over that. And we just kind of rinse and repeat until we get the layering that we want and the buildup that we want. Now, the biggest buildup of paint is always going to be in the corners or in the deepest lines. That's kind of how dirt builds up and all the weathering over time. It finds the deepest corners where it just doesn't get touched by fabric or by your hand very much because it's kind of tucked away. So for example, you see the paint going in the corners, but then when I'm dabbing with the paper towel, what stays behind is in the lowest part, in every groove, in every corner. Now from this point out, we're basically going to repeat this process all the way up and down the emitter section, and you can make it as dirty as you want or keep it as clean as you want. Alright, so we're going to take these pieces off here because I want to get into the neck, and I also want to weather the inside of those little guards so that everything looks burnt from the blades. Alright, here we go. It's basically rinse and repeat from the whole bottom half. We're just going to put a coat of paint on, dab everything away, put another coat of paint on, dab everything away until you get the results that you're looking for. So as I'm going here, you'll notice I'm using the Scotch pad a little bit more because with every layer I'm putting on, it's kind of drying and I want to be able to scratch through it to make it look a little bit worn through. And that's always cool for the emitter part because that's the part that you kind of swing it around and hitting other lightsabers with or banging it up against something. So the top of the lightsaber should probably look a little bit more worn and damaged. And again, rinse and repeat. Alright, now for the last step of painting, I always like to kind of put little rust marks everywhere. That kind of really brings it to life because these things are metal and they would rust over time. And a lot of these lightsabers, they're made out of like junk parts. So over time, you would think they would probably start rusting in the corners. So I do like to add a little bit. And it's really good for color. It makes it pop to the eye and stand out a little bit more lifelike. But this is also one of those things you don't want to overdo. You want to add a little bit to the corners and the edges just to kind of make those things pop. Alright, I think that's about it, so we're just going to seal up all of this paint with some matte clear. And that should hold all the paint in there. Alright everybody, thanks so much for hanging out for this video for the weathering of the Cal Kestis Lightsaber. Let me know what you guys think down below and give a like, subscribe, hit that notification button, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take it easy, be safe and kind out there in the world.